Hello, my name is Laura Gallo, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I hope you're all doing well. I'm here to share some information with you about children's social emotional wellness and how to help them cope through this time that we're in. So I am a faculty member at Boise State University in the Counselor Education Department. I'm also coordinator for the school counseling program. I have worked in public schools for many years and most recently as a high school counselor. So when deciding what topics would be most helpful for parents during this time, these three really kind of rose to the top as issues or areas where you might want to have a little more guidance and support in understanding what's happening with your child and some of the things that they're going through and how you can support them in that. So the first part of this video will be discussing the importance of communication. The second portion will be about emotional regulation and what that looks like. And the last part is about practicing mindfulness. So these are going to be strategies that will help your children learn how to emotionally regulate and also contribute to that communication piece that we're going to stress in the first part. So the first part, like I said, is the importance of communication. So when we think about communicating with our children, it seems like it's something that we've been doing forever, right? Since they were born. But this is really a very unique time in life. Everything's slowed down, we're spending more time together. And so there's an opportunity here to really take advantage of building these communication skills that we have with our children, especially in a time of crisis. So these are kind of the big takeaways that I hope to have parents and caregivers use with their children and keep in mind. So the first one is being available to listen and talk. We often get very busy, even when we're quarantined at home, but we have to run to the store or we have things that we want to complete, tasks. But really just being intentional with the time that you have so that your child knows it's important that you're giving them this attention to be able to sit and talk with them. Recognizing the importance of children having appropriate information. So there's all kinds of information out there and children hear things from you as their family, but then also outside sources, whether that's TV or online. So they don't always have the capability of understanding what's relevant or accurate and what isn't. So just for us as parents and caregivers to be able to acknowledge that children having appropriate and accurate information is really important. The third one is checking in often. So even if we feel that we've touched base with our child here and there might be new things that come up for them. So just acknowledging that and making it maybe a routine that we check in with them often, maybe throughout the day, or certainly at the end of the day as they're getting ready for bed, just to kind of find out if there are new things that have come up for them. And the last one is being a good role model. So in all areas of our life and with many different people. And if children see us stressing that communication piece, asking questions, checking in, they are more likely to engage in that activity themselves. So how do we talk to children about what's going on in the world? So once again, making sure you have time and space, like I mentioned before. So making maybe it's a certain point of the day or maybe a certain area of the house or outside that works really well to be able to devote that time and attention. Being honest with your child. So even if you don't know something, that's okay. You can reassure them. You can let them know you'll do your best to find out the answers to their questions. But modeling that honesty can go a long way in helping them understand that they don't have to know everything. Being accurate, of course, is important. And so using reliable resources to get your information, sharing with them what that accurate information is. Another thing that's not necessarily here on the list, but is a good reminder is having the opportunity to practice. So if talking with your child about some difficult topics is new for you, it's okay to practice. Maybe practice with another adult, practice in the mirror. That sometimes is helpful in kind of overcoming that barrier. Using language they will understand. So language that includes vocabulary they will understand, but then that is also developmentally appropriate. Our children don't need to know everything that's happening, but providing them with some accurate and honest information about what we do know that's appropriate can be really helpful in helping them be calm. When children are not given information, they sometimes jump to their own conclusions, and sometimes that can be much scarier. And so giving them that accurate information can sometimes help eliminate some of those fears. Using a tone that minimizes anxiety and fear. So being calm ourselves and being assured of the plans that are in place can really help children rely on our comfort and our ease with what's happening versus creating more insecurity for them. So using a tone that really does help them feel calm and secure is going to be important. Avoiding blaming language. So we are inundated with this language all around us, whether that's from personal contacts that we have or on the internet or the TV. So that blaming language really isn't helpful in allowing us to focus on what we can change and the positives that are around us. So it puts kind of unnecessary pressure on our children or increases that anxiety. So trying to avoid that blaming language, once again, we're the role models for them, can be really powerful. It also sends the message, it sends a different message than maybe what we'd want to send to our children. And the last one is monitoring what they see and hear on TV. So going back to that blaming language or that tone that we often see and hear, it might be helpful for not only our health, mental health, but for our child's to really limit what they're seeing and hearing around them as a way to, once again, reassure them and help them feel more at ease. So lots of reassurance, giving plenty of affection is helpful as well. So what can we take away from this pandemic that we're in and this focus on communication? Once again, I think it's an opportunity for us to really be with our children, be present with them, maybe create a stronger relationship than what we had before when we were really busy and in a rushed life. So creating new habits and new ways of interacting with our children can be a great benefit. So just remember, we are modeling those good communication skills, and we need communication skills throughout our lives. So the more we can emphasize those and focus on those with our children at a young age, the better prepared they will be to use those skills. Children are learning communication is important. So once again, we use them throughout our lives. So put the time into helping them learn those now, and seeing the importance of them as we engage with others post-pandemic. Children are learning that not everything on TV or online is accurate or even helpful. So becoming good consumers of information. We really are surrounded by lots of media sources, just a lot of information. So the opportunity to provide that instruction, that teaching about how to decipher information is going to be something that is really helpful during a pandemic or a crisis, but also later in life. So helping them understand how we interpret messages, which messages maybe we let go of, and then just understanding what may be accurate, may not be accurate, maybe inaccurate, could be really helpful for them in the future as well. And the last one, acquiring skills they can use the rest of their life. So whether that's communication, connecting to others for support, or navigating messages they hear, all really important skills that we hope they will take with them. And lastly, take care of yourself. So we do a lot of communication as the parents or caregivers, as working adults. So taking a break for yourself once in a while is okay too. So the second portion is emotional regulation. So the definition here, the ability to monitor and modulate which emotions you have, when you have them, and how you experience and express them. So it's important to recognize that emotions can, of course, be both positive and negative. How we strengthen them, use them, and control them is really important here. And these are skills that our children are not born with. So having opportunities to practice how I regulate my emotions, when it's okay to express certain emotions and how I express them is really important. And children might not all have that information or that knowledge. So there's a lot of different ways that we can work with them on that, but just recognizing that emotional regulation is an important part of their development, especially during a crisis situation. So what does this look like in children? So here's a pretty simple way of thinking about what this looks like. A child who is able to regulate their emotions is able to identify the feeling they have and express it in an acceptable way. Maybe not all the time, but in general. A child who is not able to regulate their emotions may not be able to identify the emotion, express it, or control their behavior as a result of it. So all kids can have meltdowns, of course, in times of frustration, but the child who has meltdowns regularly and for reasons the adult can't quite pinpoint may be a sign that the child doesn't have great coping skills or the ability to regulate their emotions. So what does it affect? Well, it affects relationships, whether those are family or peer, can affect academic performance, so how well they do in school, and then their long-term mental health. So for the child who struggles with emotional regulation, we often noticed it first with their relationships. Because children or teens tend to display anger, frustration, aggression, or anxiety when overwhelmed by their feelings, it puts a strain on both parent-child relationships as well as friendships. Kids will have a harder time making or keeping friends. Times of stress, like living through a pandemic, can bring up many feelings. And if a child isn't sure how to communicate these feelings or self-soothe, acting out or having meltdowns may be how they express themselves. This can be frustrating for everyone, whether it's parents, teachers, even peers who don't quite know how to handle a friend who's having a meltdown, or they're a little bit intimidated or scared by it. Where in contrast, good self-regulation in children not only positively impacts relationships, but it is also a strong predictor of academic performance and success. Effective emotion management allows a student to focus on performing during tests and exams rather than being impaired by anxiety. Students who can self-regulate also have better attention and problem-solving capabilities, and they perform better on tasks involving delayed gratification, inhibition, and long-term goals. Meanwhile, kids who have learned to regulate their emotions can also better handle and bounce back from trauma or adversity. They have a higher distress tolerance and are more resilient. So you can see there's many benefits to having good emotional regulation skills, the ability to self-soothe and to cope. And so even for the child who hasn't acquired a lot of these skills firmly yet, it's still something that we can work on with them. And this might be a great opportunity to be able to do that. So for emotional regulation, consider what is happening in the child's life that may be bringing up emotions. So you may need to be a little bit of a detective and try to kind of find out what's going on in the child's life, look at it with a curious attitude, but also think about, what else might be making them more vulnerable to their emotions. So is there a lack of sleeping, not eating, other factors? Because there may be some simple solutions as to why there's a change in their behavior. It's also possible that they're displaying new behaviors because they are in a crisis with what's happening in the world, and it's really distressing to them. So if the problem cannot be changed, for example, living through a pandemic, we can look at how we interpret or perceive the problem. Is there a shift in attitude that might be helpful or might help the situation? I think it's important to acknowledge that there are things in life we can control and other things that we cannot control, and really teaching our children about that. But we can always control our response and our attitude about it. So it's okay to tell our children that, we can't control what's happening in the world right now. We can do our part, but we can't control the bigger picture here. But we certainly can control how we feel about it, our attitude about it, how we're going to try to make the best of it. And that can really do a lot to reassure a child as well. So how do we foster emotional regulation in children? So once again, we might have children who do this already very well. Maybe there's a temporary regression or lapse in their ability to emotionally regulate because of the situation. Or we might have children who really have struggled with this since they were very little. So there's always opportunities for us to build these skills and really strengthen them with our children. So modeling the right behavior, children really do learn through observation. So the ability for adults and others around the child to demonstrate how they keep their emotions in check is really important. So maybe it means you just kind of process through some of your own emotional regulation. Like, for example, something happens, my dog, eats my shoe, and I'm really upset about it. Instead of me just working through that in my mind and getting over it, I could actually verbalize that to my child and talk about, wow, that really made me angry. I'm going to take some deep breaths. Showing them through that teaching and that modeling might help them put together some of those pieces. Delaying the response time. So helping them take a pause. Maybe this is where you teach them how to count to 5 or 10. Whatever strategies that you can use to help them just really take a step back before immediately reacting and having a meltdown. Maybe there's some breathing they can try, breathing in and out, breathing like an animal. There's lots of different fun ways to do that. But doing this pause allows the fight or flight response in them to settle down a moment, so they won't, like I said, have that automatic reaction, which they often regret later. Working on the child's emotional vocabulary. So we often assume children have emotional vocabulary, but sometimes they don't. There could be feelings that they have inside that they don't know how to name that feeling, which comes out maybe as just anger all the time. But if we really truly understood what that emotion was, we might better as parents be able to help them and support them in understanding that. Teaching them about actions and consequences. So this is a pretty logical one. It's just really helping them connect those dots. So instead of automatically giving your child some consequences after something has happened, maybe talking about why, what happened here to make this happen here, instead of just assigning the consequence without any discussion involved. So kind of that modeling and that teaching. And then let them detect stress. So I'll give you an example. So for the child who gets nervous about doing something for the first time, recognizing that that's okay. We don't want to remove the opportunity for them to try out their own problem-solving skills. We want them to build resilience and acquire the ability to be self-reliant. So there's sometimes this idea that we rescue our children from any negative experience, but there is some benefit to allowing them opportunities to go through kind of normal stages of life that we all encounter, so that they can build up those skills that they're going to need to get through life. So of course, I'm not advocating for anything extreme or super negative, but it's those small things in life that sometimes make us nervous or uncomfortable, that if given the appropriate opportunity to work through, they're learning something about themselves, and they're learning, well, I can get through that, I can manage that, and that's really important. So you can also try scaffolding or practicing behaviors. So an example would be for the child who doesn't want to stop playing video games. Maybe that always ignites a meltdown for the child. There are things that maybe you can try with them ahead of time to make that transition easier. So maybe you and your child practice go over to your chair and sit down like you're going to play your game. And instead of playing your game, I'm going to say, Jimmy, we only have, 1 minute left of video game time, and see what that feels like for you. And then have them practice getting up and leaving the video game without actually having done it, but they're just seeing what that feels like, of the behavior of listening to my mom, having to stop playing, and then getting up. So just the opportunities to practice what that feels like before they're in the moment and emotionally invested into what they're doing. That can happen with transitions too. Going to the store and the child wanting something at the store. So just opportunities to practice that before you as the parent and the child are emotionally invested in that. Okay, next section is the practicing mindfulness. So this section I'm hoping will offer some strategies and some tips for you as a parent in helping build this emotional regulation and even improve communication skills with your child. So we'll take a look at what that is. So this is a quote I like by the Dalai Lama. Afflictive emotions, our jealousy, anger, hatred, fear, can be put to an end when you realize that these emotions are only temporary, that they always pass on like clouds in the sky. This is really how I think about a lot of more negative emotions, whether that's fear or anxiety, is that, wow, they do come in and they do pass. So kind of hanging on to that can help me move through it a little bit easier. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness can be defined as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So in other words, teaching children to begin to pay attention to those things in the present moments that they never noticed before. Sounds kind of like a simple concept, but can actually be pretty hard to do once you try doing it. So there's a lot of convincing research that supports how mindfulness actually changes your brain. I'm not going to go into all the scientific information for our purposes here, but I did want you to know that incorporating mindfulness into your life and your child's can have many positive effects. There are all kinds of studies that have been coming out specifically related to children and how they've been used mindfulness in schools and as parenting techniques. So mindfulness practices have shown great effects for individuals with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression. It can also strengthen the parts of the brain that help us be more kind and caring towards other people. So using it during a pandemic can be very useful. So why practice mindfulness? So it can provide some relief from anxiety, depression, or troubling recurring thoughts. It provides a strategy to help recognize emotions and the child's reactions to these emotions. So it often is connected to the breath. This helps us focus on the here and now. Instead of being a time traveler, worrying about something from the past or something in the future, the goal is to give you a little distance from all the worries, fears, or other thoughts so that you can observe them immediately without reacting to them. If we practice mindfulness activities and get better at them, we can learn how to regulate our emotions better as this feeling of control transfers over into times we aren't engaging in a mindfulness activity. So maybe this sense of calm and peace that I have while I'm meditating or working in a yoga pose, I have this sense of calm that comes over me. The more I practice that, the more I can actually feel that in times when I start to feel stressed out. So I can actually kind of pull it in and engage that. So here's an example. Let's say I practice yoga poses every day, which I'm going to give you some tips in another video. And while I'm in the yoga pose, I'm actually concentrating on my breath. So I'm counting in for 4 counts, counting out for 4 counts. Maybe I'm breathing really deep into my belly. So because I'm concentrating on how my body feels and my breath, I'm staying in the present moment. But I'm also noticing that the worry I had when I started is not as strong. It sometimes flutters in and out, kind of like clouds, right, passing in and out of my mind, but I'm much more engaged with my body and breath. So over time, this practice allows me more and more moments to be away from those worries. And when they do come back, they don't feel so overwhelming. They're not as big. I can also go to this more relaxed place when I start to feel stressed out, like I mentioned earlier. And we can teach children this too. So how to practice mindfulness? So consider engaging in these activities with your child at least the first few times. Once again, that observation for them is really important, and that ability for them to see somebody else doing it, or that it's important enough for my parent to be doing this with me, can really set a tone. Also, don't get caught up in it being perfect. If you find some resources online and they're really scripted and want you to do it a certain way, you don't have to stick to that. There's really not one way to do mindfulness. That's the beauty of it. So allow flexibility, go with what your child likes doing, what they're more willing to buy into, and then just don't push those expectations. Once again, being a good role model. So maybe you'll find mindfulness has become a practice that you've really enjoyed and want to incorporate it into your life as well. So think about doing that post-pandemic. And it can be practiced in many different ways. So if you have this idea that mindfulness just looks like people sitting on a pillow meditating, it doesn't have to look that way. Meditation or mindfulness can look so many different ways. So these are just a few examples I wrote down. Meditation, yoga, mindful eating, lots of breathing exercises out there. And then really any physical activity where you are purposeful and intentional about how you're practicing it can be considered a mindfulness activity, just by being present in the moment, connecting to your breath. So lots of opportunities and a variety of ways to practice this. So once again, it's really about being present in the moment, increasing awareness, and connecting your body and mind. One important takeaway from understanding mindfulness is that it can take time to feel the benefits. It takes practice, just like learning an instrument. The more you practice, the better you'll get at it. With that being said, you could practice it the first time and feel an overwhelming sense of calm or peace. So it can happen in the first time, but just know that it often takes some practice and like ingraining it into your brain for it to really feel beneficial. So I did write out a few examples. I have breath counting, and I wanted to read you a couple different types of breath counting you can do. So we have, we would sit calmly for a few seconds and slowly start counting. For example, you can count to 5 to inhale and 7 to exhale. The goal of the exercise is to focus on our breathing and following the counting as we inhale and exhale. Breath shifting. So here we place one hand on our chest and the other hand on our belly, and notice how they rise and fall with each inhale and exhale. By doing so, we aim to see the difference between the chest and belly movement during breathing, and it helps in regaining focus into our bodies. And the last one is breath relaxation. So breath relaxation is the most basic breathing exercise and works particularly well for stress, anxiety, or emotional disorders. The practice is to sit back and take deep breaths with eyes closed, and continuing doing so until we can feel the connection between our body and mind, and realize the stress and negativity are fading away with each breath. So lots of different breathing opportunities out there. So you can find one that really fits well with you, that you enjoy. There are lots of options. So progressive relaxation is one that I've used a lot, and it actually works really well with kids. They can get into it, but it is a guided practice. So you are focusing attention on different parts of your body, and you are laying still and quiet with your eyes closed, and somebody would talk you through those different parts of the body. So they might start in the right hand, thumb, second finger, third finger, fourth finger. So it's just like a progressing through the body, but paying special attention to each different part of the body. And it's very calming and very relaxing. So once again, because there's this voice talking to you, it's keeping you in the present moment, it's keeping you relaxed, and it's just helping slow down your brain, slow down your breathing, which is all very relaxing and good for your body. And then the last note there is just really that you can find any of these online, and you can find ones that are specially designed for children. So I think the trick is finding something that they'll buy into, that they'd be interested in trying or even excited about trying. And you can change it up, add different ones, just something that they'd be likely to engage in, that you would enjoy engaging in as well. It's a great opportunity for some family time. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening and paying attention and being committed to helping your child's social emotional wellness. There's nothing really more important than our children. So thank you and take care, stay safe.